Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, with the North and South Carolina General Assembly's regular sessions complete and most of the public policy heavy lifting done for 2013, the dust of that policy begins to settle, and the business of moving forward now is at hand. Welcome again to the most widely watched program on Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and this time, Otis Rawl from the South Carolina Chamber and economist Dr. Frank Hefner from the College of Charleston start the dialogue.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 2nd, 2013. On this week's program, Dr. Frank Hefner of the College of Charleston, Otis Rawl of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Happy summer. Otis, good to have you here. Welcome back.
Well, Chris, glad to be back.
Thank you. Frank, good to have you from the Low Country. Thanks for coming up here. And by the way, thank you, both of you. You know, you've been a couple of our panelists that repeat customers and great, and you always make time to come join us. And I know it's not a small commitment, so sincerely, thank you to you both. Let's start with, the latest unemployment number. I don't want to go too far down this road, but the latest unemployment in both the Tar Heel State and the Palmetto State both ticked up. Mm-hmm. Nationally, that number went down. Frank, listen, since you're the purveyor of the dismal science over here, let me start with you. Isn't that number supposed to be going in the opposite direction with summer seasonal employment? We're all feeling better about the economy. Is this the wrong direction?
Well, remember, not only am I dismal, but I have two hands, so I've got one going up and one going down at the same time. And then I'll contradict myself later on. But the real issue with the unemployment numbers, fortunately, thank goodness, this time they released it on time instead of an early advance notice like they did last month. I don't know if you caught that, where they made a mistake and they did a pre-announcement, but nobody lost or made any money off the deal, so there was no big issue there. But what happens with these numbers is that we're chasing 0.1%. And so even though there's a change in either direction, it's not a substantial change. So the national number goes down, the unemployment rate drops just a tad. Oh, big deal. The biggest problem there is that the labor force participation rate has actually dropped, which means the number of able people in the workforce has declined. And that's not good for a healthy economy. So the question is not the unemployment rate, but are we generating the kind of jobs we need? Are we getting people working, and more importantly, working in the kinds of jobs that will move either state, both states and the nation forward? And that's the big debate right now.
Yeah, Otis, before we move down this workforce, what's the workforce really like, and looking under the hood here, is there anything you can add to this unemployment number? Is this even anything you worry about?
Well, honest to goodness, Chris, I don't know how all these things interplay with the Affordable Health Care Act. But a lot of our businesses are making decisions now on what type of employment that they're going to have for the next 4 or 5 years, and even whether or not they're going to employ people. Under the Affordable Health Care Act, there are limits where certain parts of the act kick in. For instance, if you've got more than 50 employees, then you've got to do certain things. So I think there are a lot of people standing back, waiting now that everything's been delayed, trying to figure out what their entire workforce looks like. Are they going to fill it with part-time employees? Or are they going to go beyond that step 50 where they incur all these additional expenses? I think that's slowing some of the growth down. I think the other issue that that we're dealing with too nationally is, we were hoping that you could get 300,000 or 400,000 new jobs created each month, very much like we have in February. But we've been below 200,000 every month nationally. So whatever's happening is happening nationally, and for my folks, I think it's affordable health care and trying to decide what their workforce looks like and how many people they're going to employ down the road and what those costs could be.
So Frank, does Obamacare, is the extension of some of the deadlines in Obamacare to next year and to 2014 and 2015, is this having a chilling effect to what Otis is just talking about?
Well, it introduces more policy uncertainty, and policy uncertainty is really not very healthy for a growing economy. And I think that's the biggest problem, because for fear of making a mistake by doing something, a lot of people will choose not to do something. And as a result, they won't expand. They won't go where they need to go in terms of where their business should be. But back to some of the statistic numbers I want to point out is that if we realize that the GDP figures, which was recently revised all the way back decades, and it turns out we discovered that on the revised gross domestic product numbers, that the recession wasn't as bad as we had thought, and the recovery was a little bit better than we had thought also as a result of that. Well, let's put that in context. For some reason, they've re-benchmarked it and revisited how they're going to measure it. But I think the job numbers are the more telling numbers. How much is actually produced is, of course, obviously very important. But the bottom line for most people walking around the street is whether they have a job or not, and whether that job pays a decent salary.
Do you feel, let me interrupt you here for a second, and I want you both to answer this question. Do you feel like those that have jobs, all of us, sitting around this table, no matter what level, do you think there's still that level of uncertainty? I know we have this huge gap in unemployment, and those, as you said, that have just walked away from even trying to find a job, but is there still that acute sense of, gosh, any moment the next shoe could drop and I could lose my gig, if you will?
Well, I think for the consumer confidence numbers say no. It says that people are actually feeling better about their prospects. So I think 2 years ago, when everyone was worried about these issues, and rightfully so, after 2 years of maintaining your job, that fear kind of disappears. And I think you'll see that also.
Well, talking to my folks, and what they're still concerned with is things at the national level that limits their decision-making process. Like, they still believe we got to fix the federal debt, that even though things are improving there, the debt's not really growing as at the rate it was. I think that if you want to, the horror show that could happen in any time, it doesn't take but one world event to kind of throw us in disarray. Even though we're seeing a bunch of international companies invest in the U.S. and particularly in South Carolina because of what happened with the euro, I think domestic corporations are still waiting to see, and that uncertainty is causing them to not invest, not expand, and subsequently not create the jobs that we would anticipate having come out of a recession and should be growing. We should be growing more than 2% GDP. For us to really be pretty good, we probably need to be 2.5, 2.3 to 2.5 to really be considered to be successful, and we're not growing at that rate. And I think it's because of the uncertainty at the federal level on policy issues, whether it's labor issues, regulatory issues, employment issues, debt issues. All those things are just looming out there for the business community. One
of the issues that comes up a lot is workforce development. I mean, to the point where you say it and it becomes innocuous with so many different issues. And I want to frame it this way. The technical college system in South Carolina, the community college system in North Carolina, just different names for the same thing, have long, at least in contemporary history, have said that they need to be the place to have those apprenticeship type programs, to be the interaction between business and education. In South Carolina, and we had the president of the South Carolina Technical College System, Darrell Stott, on this program not long ago, and he even talked about it. But when you look at particular schools in South Carolina, and I'm going to call them out. One is Horry Georgetown Tech, and one is Midlands Tech. And these are community college / technical college systems that talk about workforce development, but when you look at their marketing and their public relations, this is about, they want to be the gateway for the 4-year degree. Yeah. They want to reach out and get the people to say, come here, you can get into USC, you can get into Clemson, you can get into College of Charleston, take your pick, or you can get into Furman, wherever. But my point is, they're talking about one thing, but they're spending their money on marketing in the other. Do you get that sense?
Well, the answer to that is yes, Chris, because some of our manufacturers and business people are talking about whether or not the technical colleges are training people to do what needs to be done for the jobs that will be created. I think we helped that a little bit this year with a piece of legislation we passed in South Carolina with manufacturing skills certification. I think that's probably where you hear the most of it is out of the manufacturing community with advanced skills and certification. But hopefully what we'll do by putting this program is have a standardized program that addresses what manufacturers are looking for and the type of skill sets they've got. A lot of places, I think where we've kind of lost that mission is it's cheaper to go get an English 101 or Math 101 that you can transfer to a university without the cost. And you know, the business community has been part of the reason that we've developed these bridge programs between the technical colleges and the four-year. So we created a little bit of ourselves. But the real issue is, should the technical colleges be a training avenue for the jobs that are creating, like Ready SC, where if a Boeing comes in or a Michelin comes in or BMW, where they actually train those folks for the types of jobs that's going to be created.
Should they be
There's
doing
no
that?
question. And they do a really good job of it. I just think that it's a lot of it's incumbent on the business community to go back and tell our students in high school where the jobs could be created, what type of pays go be in those jobs, and try to direct these kids to these technical jobs that require associate's degree. And we know that manufacturing is where most of the jobs could be created. But some of it is on ourselves that we're not delivering the right message, because when you think about manufacturing, you think about the old textile jobs, dirty factories, low-paying jobs, and that's not the case now. Most jobs in manufacturing, $50,000 jobs with benefits and all. And I'll use Michelin as a great example. They're recruiting folks right now, paying for them to go to school, doing apprenticeships and workforce issues while they're going to school in their plants. And a child has a young adult has a chance to go to school, have his education paid for, have a job, put that money in the bank, and really kill two birds at one stone. With one stone. So we as the business community have got to develop the concepts to take to the technical colleges to accomplish what needs to be done.
Okay, Frank, you don't have to go far anywhere, and you've even talked around this issue to hear businesses say there is a work skills gap, plain as day.
Yes.
We can't find people to put in these jobs, and my guess is it's a lot of that squarely rests on the South Carolina Technical College system. Is the technical college system doing as much as they need to be doing to bridge that gap?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Michelin as an example. I mean, to use, because it's a European firm, and in Europe they've done this for a long time. Now, Europe's got a lot of pluses and minuses. They've got an incredibly high unemployment rate, and in some parts of Europe they're really, they're moribund, they're just stagnant. But Germany has got a traditional, very good workforce preparation program, with the understanding that not everyone's cut out to go to college. And there is no Federal Reserve policy that's going to convert a philosophy major into a plumber. So you just can't do that. When the jobs are open in one field, you're going to need certain kinds of skills. And we need to have that emphasized more, that there's nothing wrong with not going to college. And there's a lot right with getting a high-skilled, high-paid, technical-type job, which can be across the board in a lot of fields, as you point, manufacturing, a lot of other areas. Unfortunately, the technical schools have started bridging more into the community college route, and as we've mentioned, and lost that focus. But a nice, healthy partnership with apprenticeships and training things, workforce preparation with businesses would work a long ways to that.
All right, coming up on this program next week and then the week following, couple really good dialogues. Next week, Wayne Holden, Dr. Wayne Holden, is the new president and CEO at RTI, Research Triangle Institute, that is in Research Triangle Park. This is almost an almost $800 million research group that has been around for 50 years, and they are remaking themselves, and we'll hear more about the impact there. And then coming up after that, very interesting program, the chief executives of municipalities. Mayor Stephen Wakila from Florence, South Carolina, Mayor Stephen Benjamin from Columbia, Mayor Terry Bellamy from Asheville, and Mayor Patsy Kinsey from Charlotte. You know, let's talk about politics just a second. No surprise, South Carolina is a red state. Has been leaning right for a while, at least politically, in most cases. When you look at what's going on in North Carolina, now that North Carolina has a, and you can call it a supermajority, they run the House, they run the Senate, they have the governor's mansion, and there have been many criticisms, even from the right, to say that Republicans have overreached in North Carolina. No doubt they've made some meaningful changes in things like corporate tax reform and other great things, but they seemingly, according to many people, have gotten bogged down in some of the social issues around abortion, around some voter ID issues, around the official religion. There was one particular legislator in North Carolina that wanted to name an official religion. My point is this, is not to get too pointed here, but from your point of view, does the North Carolina GOP need to focus more on getting some of the larger issues done and not get caught up in the social issues?
From my perspective, I think North Carolina's not any different than a lot of the other red states and what Republicans are doing in other states.
And by the way, Otis, now North Carolina thinks it's a purple state.
Yeah, it's a purple state. I got you. Well, but going to that, if you go back to the election and you really ask people what's important to them, it's jobs. And creation of jobs and creating wealth and creating growth in per capita income. And I think at times we lose the focus and focus on these social issues rather than picking up those issues that are really meaningful for the individual. I mean, nothing else really matters if you don't have a job, you can't pay the bills, you're wondering how you're going to get your next meal, you're wondering how you'll clothe your children, those types of things. And I think once you get off on these other issues, yeah, they're issues, but are they really the issues that matter? As I travel the state and talk at local chambers of commerce and other business groups, you ask them what the number one thing that we ought to be focusing on is jobs. Forget about voter ID, forget about nullification, forget about
we know how successful that has been in the past.
And, you know, what these things that take up time but really add no value to the bottom line of the businesses, the state, or the taxpayers of the state. So I think we get misguided a little bit and need to focus on those things that create wealth for our citizens.
Yeah, Frank, what do you
Well, it's hard to rally around the flag on something as mundane as a corporate tax rate.
Yeah.
I mean, when's the last time you saw protesters walking up and down the street arguing that the corporate tax rate was too high or not?
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me make this point. In South Carolina, you know, the contention for a long time was to get that Confederate flag off the top of the State House. Some people said, heck no. Other people said, absolutely. And what kind of, sort of, and I'm not even doing it justice, what happened in South Carolina is it did move, but it wasn't really the General Assembly. It wasn't the State House. It was business groups that made that, handled that part when the politics of politics and the politics of policy making was really where they were focused, and I think handled that part well. So should some of the social issues, and I'm not a proponent for or against it, but it seems like the North Carolina GOP have hurt their brand when they clearly still can be in the middle of bringing people together and not pushing people apart, not being so divisive.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of politicians who make a career out of being divisive, and that gets them elected apparently, and that's what sells their particular viewpoints and their brand. And it's easy to get people marching in those kinds of issues. As I said, arguing between a 7% versus a 5% corporate tax rate is not very emotionally appealing to most people. It might be the most important issue, though. Arguing whether the United States, for example, corporate tax rate, we're one of the few countries that taxes its citizens, not regardless of where they're located. So we don't have a territorial corporate tax. If you're an American and you're living in Finland, by gosh, you're paying American taxes. If you're Finnish living in the United States, you do not pay Finnish taxes. So we have those kind of issues. And so those kind of unlocking those problems could do vastly more to solving everything else. And we have a languishing economy. We've got jobs that need to be dealt with. We've got infrastructure issues. We've got some pretty big things that are going to determine what our quality of life is going to look like for the next 20 years.
You know, Otis, it seems like Governor Haley in South Carolina has made a shift more toward the center on education. She, and I know you know this well, and that's why I'm asking you this, seems like she is leaning toward some type of education reform or modification in existing. Is this a shift to the center? Is this could be this a meaningful change in South Carolina?
Well, I think so. She was at our office meeting with some of our business leaders talking about education this week. And I think the one issue that we lose sight of, and she went back to her home community where she grew up, and she went into Bamberg schools, and they didn't even have a projector to be able to show the video that she wanted to show of what she wanted to talk about and how she was moving South Carolina forward. And I think the debate in South Carolina is going to be around a couple things. It's not going to be reforming, it's going to be transforming education in South Carolina. And the way we do that is we got to look at how the delivery system that we use to deliver education. I mean, when you and I and Frank came, it was a pencil and a piece of paper. Kids want to learn off of iPads and off their iPhones, and that's how you got to deliver the message. But the other thing is it goes to competency. Why do we have a kid that's mastered a subject? Why do we make him sit in a seat 180 days when he could be doing or she could be doing something else down the road? I think the other thing when we're talking about transforming education is we got to go back and address the issues of inequality in our school system on how we fund public education. The business community would like to see all those dollars come to the state, divvy it out on a per capita basis, and wherever a kid goes and moves from district to district, he pulls those dollars with him. And you have a chance where you're not paying $17,000 in Fairfield County for a kid to go to school or $6,000 in Marion County. Every kid's got the same chance to have the same number of dollars spent in him in their community. And I think you can see that. You can see how the delivery system changed. You can see the funding mechanism changed. And I think you can see some real debate around early childhood education. We know that 39% of our children cannot read on grade level by the 4th grade.
Do you think this debate will bear fruit and won't just be talking points?
No, I think what you're going to see is going to be see dollars spent on early childhood education, reading programs, summer programs where kids get up to grade level. They were already talking about not socially promoting kids until they attain a certain level. I mean, the worst thing you can do is take a kid that can't read on the 1st grade level and put them into 2nd grade. All they do is fall farther behind. So we've got to get those 39% on reading level by 4th grade.
And let me interrupt you because we're going to run out of time. Frank, do you think that's lost on anyone? Let me go back to the example that Otis just talked about, that the governor went into her school in Bamberg, South Carolina, and noticed that they didn't have the basic resources that they needed. Here is an example of somebody at the top of the house in an organization that got close to the customer and realized, well, wait a minute, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. You think that'll be lost on many people? I mean, that's what CEOs kind of talk about doing, is getting down into the trenches to see what needs to get done.
It'd be good if more people did that. I think participation in the schools would help out a lot. I mean, where parents are actively involved in schools and see what's happening, I think you get better results, you get better lobbying. Where parents and the community basically feel as if the school is supposed to do its job independent of our input, and then we don't like the output, that's kind of abdicating your responsibility. So I agree. I mean, I think more people need to get involved. Maybe everyone in the General Assembly ought to put a couple of days in a public school somewhere.
You think you can get that one through there?
Well, I will tell you, you'd be surprised at the number of people that are engaged. And, you know, the companies that I use, BMW and Michelin and Colonial, they're giving their employees, 2 hours a day to go in and help kids learn how to read. And you're seeing some pretty advanced increases in the ability of these kids to be able to read in some schools as much as 150% in 1 year. So, I mean, that's pretty revealing. 30
seconds left, specific to Charleston. George Benson from the College of Charleston has announced he's stepping down. Ray Greenberg is leaving MUSC, which surprised many people.
Yes.
Is that going to be a vacuum of leadership in the community in the Low Country?
Well, hopefully not, because education is such a very important part of our economy. It's not just important in general, but it is a job generator in the Charleston area with the size of the schools we're talking about. I think, yes, it's going to be a vacuum, but I think there are a lot of qualified people who would like to step into those positions because of the nature of the institutions, of their quality. So more than likely, we'll find very qualified replacements.
Yeah, no short list of good candidates.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Frank, thanks for being on the
Thank
program
you.
again. Otis, always nice to have you here. Thank you.
Chris, thank you.
It's great insight. Thank you for joining us. If you have any comments, please go to our website, carolinabusinessreview.com, and join in the dialogue. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.